Podcasting is something I feel is where there's a lot, you meet so many different people professionally. There's a limited amount of time that you get with them. People professionally, there's a limited amount of time that you get with them where you all need to push in what you have to do, and there's a lot of fine balances that needs to be maintained. So that part, if you could elaborate a bit, then I'm sure our audiences would love it.
Okay, sure. Sometimes I get nervous, not so much as I would say, not as much as I used to in the past. But I definitely get nervous in certain moments, usually at the very beginning of a show, because you always want to nail the opening. You always want to make sure that it comes off smoothly, that it's clean. And then once you kind of get into it, then you just go with the flow, and then you settle in, and you don't even realize or remember really that a lot of people are watching. You're so focused on what you're doing that you don't think about who's on the other side of the camera per se, in terms of how many people are watching. So I just kind of get into the zone, I get into my zen, and I get really focused on who I'm talking to, what I want to ask them. I have to listen to the director, the producer, hear their instructions in terms of countdowns, or if they want to move on to another subject. So there's a lot going on at once. So you end up establishing a nice rapport and a nice relationship with them. And I was very lucky. They were all just brilliant people. I mean, they blew me away in terms of how cool they were. Outside of the studio, when they let their guard down, and they were a little bit more human and quite personable, let's say. It was very easy to spend time with them. It was very easy to talk to them about anything, and they really treated me as an equal, which was very nice. So when you have that kind of nice relationship outside of the studio, when you come into the studio, it makes life a lot easier, and it makes work a lot easier because you get along so well, and you grow a certain level of comfort to a point where you can start making jokes with them, and they can make jokes back, and it makes, for at least for me, a much nicer experience. It's not so stiff, it's not so awkward, it's not so formal. I mean, we're here to have fun at the end of the day. It's entertainment, it's football, it's passion, it's emotion. And I'm a football fan, apart from the fact that I'm a broadcaster. And so I want to share that same level of enthusiasm with the people that I'm in the studio with as everyone else, And anyone who's watching us, I want them to feel like they're part of it, because it's an experience that we're all in together, really. And at the end of the day, whoever's watching you want them to enjoy what they're watching. You want them to be entertained. You want them to want to stick around and to continue watching with you, So if I can create that kind of environment within the studio, then I feel like, for me, in some ways, a large part of my job is done. So
everyone sees the glamour. Now, I'm sure Anukarsh sir also has a lot to say about it. But as we move on to a certain layered section of the sport of the episode, because as always, I'm going to say it again, as I do in many of our episodes, I'm a sports management student. I'm learning a lot about sports now, like not only the broadcast part, the glamour part, but also what goes behind the scenes. So everyone sees the good parts of working in sports. And as Anukarsh sir, I must admit, he was the one who had gone through a lot of the efforts and persistence to get you on our podcast, as he does for most other times. But
I'll tell you the story. It was around Christmas, and we were having drinks, Zoe and I. And then suddenly, I was saying, if there's one guest we have to get on the podcast next year, who would it be? Okay, and Zoe Pine is I would love if Semra comes to our show, but I don't think that can happen. I was like, and we are generally having drinks. We had an episode that day with Manas Singh. I don't know if you know him. He works on Sony.
I know of him, but I don't know him personally. I've never met him.
Okay. So thing is that we were actually excited about that episode itself. But though you said that, and I was like, okay, I'll try my level best. What if she says? And at that point of time, you were vacationing around, that was after the World Cup, somewhere around that. So I was
I needed a bit of a break after the World Cup. I was
absolutely
very exhausted by the end of it.
Much deserved also. So I told him that this is like a mixed sort of a news that she might join us, but for now it's a no. So he was like, okay. He wasn't very disheartened, but we had hope at that point of time, right?
Yeah.
So and when you said yes,
and it's also similar to what you just said, because we were so passionate about doing this podcast, and we were just hopeful that if not, and to be honest, I'll admit that I did not expect Semra to be here with us so soon. But I said, yeah, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year. But I mean, yeah, to sticking to what I wanted to ask about this land, we did go through your social media in detail, and there were posts where you mentioned like the Heineken deadline day where which you did in September last year. You mentioned it was more than 12 hours of live stream and then further work. So what I believe what makes sports special apart from the players are also people like you in the industry who are working tirelessly. So can you spread some light on this lesser known aspects of working in sports?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's actually a good thing to talk about because you're right. Going back to something you said about earlier, a lot of people look at the glitz and the glam of television and think that people just turn up and they just start talking and that's it. And it's really not how it works. I mean, what you see is just the tip of the iceberg because we put in so many hours of air in preparation and making sure everything goes smoothly and making sure we do all of our research, making sure that we know exactly how we want to structure things and what order we want to do them. Be ready in the case that there's any kind of surprises, shall we say, because in live television it happens all the time. A lot of the times you need to have plan A, plan B, plan C. You have to have various options ready because things go wrong all the time. So it's so important to do the legwork in the lead up to a show. I mean, I'll give you an example. So for La Liga TV, which is where I work now, I do 10-hour days. And my show is at the end of the day and it's only an hour and a half. So I'm in at 11 in the morning. We have the whole day to prepare the show. And then there's like around 5 o'clock, let's say. So from 11 to 5, so for about 6 hours, you sit with the editor, the producer, whatever. You go through the running order, what you want to talk about, the order in which you want to talk about things, and then you prepare everything that you want to talk about. Especially because I don't use a prompter, and I didn't use a prompter in India either. Everything is completely improvised. So it's improvised, but it's prepared. So by taking notes and everything, it helps me to remember things a lot better and a lot quicker.
Interesting.
Because I don't have anything to read. So I need to know what I'm talking about. So that's why it's really, really important to study up in advance. So I have 6 hours to do that during the day. Then around 5 o'clock, let's say I go into hair and makeup, it takes an hour. And then I have an hour margin to do maybe any last minute kind of fine tuning or anything that we want to make sure we go through before we go into the show itself. And then from 7 to 8:30, we do the show. So that's just an example of like a regular day in the office for me here in Spain. So in the World Cup, for example, we started a few days beforehand with rehearsals and we were doing